The morning I found my barn in a heap of splintered wood and twisted metal, I thought maybe a tornado had touched down overnight. But there wasn't a cloud in the sky, just the sound of a diesel engine pulling away down the hill. That's when I saw the excavator tracks in the dirt, still fresh. And then I saw her, Charlene McDoyle, standing across the street in her oversized sunglasses and leopard print blouse, sipping from a tumbler that probably held more Chardonnay than water. "You're welcome," she called out, waving like she'd done me a favor. I stood there stunned. "What the hell did you do to my barn?" Charlene sauntered across the road like she owned the whole county. "That eyesore violated Article 12, Section 6 of the HOA Aesthetic Standards. Non-permitted agricultural structures aren't allowed in clear view of the front road. It's on my land, Charlene." She tilted her head and did that fake laugh thing middle-aged HOA tyrants always do when they think they're smarter than you. "Your land is technically within the HOA boundary." "You signed when you moved in." I crossed my arms. "I didn't sign anything. I bought this parcel from the county auction 5 years ago. It was never part of the HOA. "Oh, honey, you should check the updated maps. We annexed that strip last year. Voted unanimously. You can't annex private property without the owner's consent. We can when it's in the community's best interest." I could feel the heat rising in my neck. Charlene had been a thorn in my side since the day I built the barn. She called it an eyesore, even though it matched the color of my house and was hidden behind a fence. The truth, she hated that I refused to join her little regime. I was the only one on the street who didn't pay HOA dues or bow to her every command, and now she'd crossed the line. Literally. I spent the rest of the day making calls county assessor, zoning office, even my friend Marty who worked in real estate law. And guess what? Not only was my land not within HOA jurisdiction, but the HOA's annexation attempt hadn't followed any legal protocols. No public notice. No survey filings. Nothing. But that wasn't even the best part. While digging through property records, Marty found something strange. Apparently, when the developer first parceled off this area, there was a clerical error. A 3-acre triangle of land smack in the middle of the subdivision was never transferred to the HOA. It still belonged to the original developer's trust, which had dissolved. And guess who picked it up at a tax lien sale 2 years ago? "Carlson," Marty said over the phone, "you own it." And right there, on that 3-acre triangle, sat a certain overdecorated mansion with 4 pillars, a koi pond, and a woman named Charlene McDoyle sunbathing in a lawn chair like she was queen of the cul-de-sac. I looked up at the ruins of my barn. "Oh, Charlene," I said, staring toward her house. "You just started a war you can't win." HOA story HOA stories Homeowners Association stories. I drove to the county recorder's office the next morning, paperwork in hand, pulse steady. The front desk clerk, a young guy with a buzz cut and a coffee mug that read "Not My Circus," barely looked up when I slid the documents across the counter. "I need a certified copy of this deed and parcel map. And I want to file a notice of ownership on the parcel listed here, Tract 14, Section 3B. He gave me a sideways glance when he saw the tract number. "You sure about that?" he asked. "That's the land right in the middle of the Briar Glen development. I'm sure." He stamped the papers without another word. By noon, I was standing at the edge of that very tract, 3 acres of manicured landscaping, winding driveways, and ornamental shrubbery all laid out like a suburban Versailles. It was surreal knowing I technically owned it, not just the sidewalks or the greenbelt, the entire chunk of land. Including the $1-million homes sitting on it. The law was a strange thing. If the HOA had done their due diligence, they might have realized what they were squatting on. But they were too busy flexing their paper-thin authority to notice their foundation was made of sand, and I had just kicked the whole thing loose. I called Marty again. "They're going to lose it," he said. "You're going to want to record a quiet title action. It'll hold up in court if they try to contest, and Carlson, don't say anything yet. Let them hang themselves." That afternoon, I installed a small trail camera in the trees bordering my property line, not for security, for evidence. Because if Charlene had the gall to send in a dozer without warning, then she'd try something worse when she realized I had the upper hand. And sure enough, the camera caught her that night. Standing out on her front lawn, pacing in a robe with her phone clamped to her ear, shouting into the dark. She wasn't alone either. 2 board members joined her. Doug, the guy with the shiny belt buckles and a landscaping truck he parked like it was a trophy, and Teresa, who ran the HOA's compliance committee like a medieval inquisition. The next morning, a letter arrived in my mailbox. Plain white envelope, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper: cease and desist all property claims regarding Tract 14. HOA legal counsel has been retained. Any further action will result in fines and litigation. I took the letter straight to Marty. They're bluffing, he said after reading it. There's no legal precedent for them to claim ownership retroactively. If they want to contest it, they'll have to file in civil court, and they can't do that without exposing the original annexation as fraudulent. That opens them up to criminal liability. I raised an eyebrow. Criminal? Charlene authorized demolition on a structure she had no jurisdiction over, on land the HOA doesn't own. That's destruction of private property. You've got photos, timestamps, and now this threat letter. That's coercion layered on top. That evening, I paid a visit to the county sheriff's office. I didn't expect much. Small town. Everyone knew everyone. But when I showed the deputy the footage of the excavator, the letter, and the parcel ownership documents, he narrowed his eyes. You're telling me this HOA president ordered equipment onto your land and tore down your structure? Yes. And they've threatened you since? Correct. He leaned back in his chair, rubbed his jaw. You willing to make a formal statement? I already typed one. He read it over, then stood. Wait here. He returned 10 minutes later with his supervisor. They asked more questions. Then they called the county prosecutor. By the time I got home, Charlene had already left another note on my door. This one was handwritten. Less legal jargon, more frantic energy. We need to talk. This has gone far enough. I didn't respond. Instead, I had a surveyor come out the next morning. We placed bright orange flags along the entire boundary of Tract 14. Right through Charlene's flower beds, across her koi pond, and squarely through the middle of her circular driveway. By mid-afternoon, she was standing on her porch again, arms crossed, lips pressed so tight they practically disappeared. You're trespassing, she shouted as the surveyor packed up. He didn't even look at her. Not according to the county records, ma'am. I stepped out of my truck, holding a rolled-up copy of the parcel map. Charlene, you've got exactly 2 options. Either vacate the property voluntarily or we can settle it in court. But I should warn you there's a criminal investigation underway. Her face went pale. You're bluffing. Am I? I handed her the sheriff's business card. I didn't know, she said quietly, almost to herself. You didn't care, I corrected. That barn you destroyed. It wasn't just lumber and nails. My grandfather built the frame from reclaimed timber. The roof tiles were salvaged from the family farm. You stole history, and now you're going to answer for it. For the first time since I'd moved in, she didn't answer with a smile or a threat. She just turned and walked back inside, the door closing like a coffin lid behind her. That weekend, I filed the quiet title action and sent copies to every homeowner whose house sat on Tract 14. I included a polite notice. Due to recent title clarifications, your property may be subject to lease renegotiation or relocation. Panic spread like a brush fire. Within days, I was getting calls from neighbors. Some were furious, some were confused, most were just scared. I told them all the same thing. I wasn't after their homes, I was after justice. And if they wanted out of the HOA, I'd help them. Teresa resigned from the board within 48 hours. Doug followed suit after he learned the county had subpoenaed HOA records. Charlene. She tried to rally support, but no one would back her. Especially after the sheriff's office served her with a summons for property damage and fraudulent claims. Funny how fast loyalty dries up when jail time's on the table. By the end of the month, the HOA was in full collapse. They'd lost all authority, their bank account was frozen under court order, and the developer's original trust, which I now controlled, had filed to dissolve the remaining structure of the HOA entirely. And me, I rebuilt the barn. Bigger, stronger, solar panels on the roof, security cameras hidden in the eaves, and a flagpole out front, flying an old, weathered banner that had once flown over my grandfather's farm, the same one Charlene tried to erase. But the real victory came when the sheriff called. "Charges are moving forward," he said. "Charlene's being arraigned next week. You might want to be there." I told him I wouldn't miss it for the world, not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted her to see what real accountability looked like. And maybe, just maybe, she'd think twice before tearing something down that didn't belong to her. Charlene didn't appear for her arraignment. Her attorney showed up instead, a wiry man in a suit 2 sizes too expensive for the case he was trying to keep quiet. He requested a continuance, citing personal family matters. The judge granted it with a sigh and a warning that no shows wouldn't be tolerated twice. That gave me time. While Charlene's legal team scrambled to stall the inevitable, I turned my focus to the parcel itself. I wanted to know what, exactly, I could do with it. Owning the land under someone's home wasn't just symbolic, it came with a set of oddly powerful rights. I met with a land use attorney in the next county over, someone who had no ties to Briar Glen or its residents. She studied the documents, cross-referenced tax records, and tapped her pen against her notepad before leaning back in her chair. If the homes were built without a valid land transfer, then the structures are technically encroachments. You could file for ejectment, or charge rent, or convert the title to a leasehold estate. I raised an eyebrow. Even though they've lived there for years, possession doesn't override ownership unless they can prove adverse possession, which they won't be able to. Not with the HOA misconduct now public record. "The court will side with you." She paused, then added, "But I'd recommend a different approach. Use this leverage to dissolve the HOA entirely. Offer to sell back the land under their homes for a single dollar on one condition." "What's that?" "They agree to permanently terminate the HOA charter." It was a brilliant move. I'd never cared about collecting rent or forcing anyone out. I just wanted to make sure Charlene's empire crumbled so thoroughly that no one could rebuild it. I called a meeting. Not a formal one, no newsletters, no community bulletin boards, just a sign posted on the community gate. "Important property meeting. Carlson's front yard. Saturday at 4 p.m. That day, 32 residents showed up. Some looked angry, some curious. A few brought folding chairs and thermoses like it was a tailgate. I stood on the rebuilt barn's front steps and laid out the facts quietly, clearly, without drama. Charlene had authorized demolition on land she didn't control. The HOA had extended its boundaries illegally, and I now owned the land under 7 homes, including her own. I showed them the certified deeds, the parcel maps. The surveyor's signature. Dead silence followed. Then a man in a faded flannel shirt spoke. I recognized him, lived 2 doors down from Charlene, never said more than a nod in passing. "So what do you want from us?" I held up a folder. "A termination agreement. If every homeowner signs it, the HOA dissolves permanently. No more dues. No more compliance officers, no more board. In exchange, I'll sell the land beneath your homes to you for a single dollar each." A woman near the back raised her hand. "What happens if we don't sign?" "You'll remain tenants under a lease I control. Monthly rent will be market rate. You'll also be responsible for back payments, and you'll deal directly with me for any land use issues." I let the words settle. "I don't want your money," I added. "I want the HOA gone, for good. That's the only goal here." By the end of the hour, 24 people had signed. By the next morning, 6 more dropped off their paperwork. The only holdout was Charlene. She'd gone quiet. Her house was dark, blinds drawn, mailbox overflowing. Rumor was she'd taken a long-term suite at a hotel uptown, probably trying to avoid process servers and media attention. But she couldn't avoid what came next. The county prosecutor filed formal charges the following week: destruction of private property, false claim of authority, and fraudulent administration of a chartered organization. 3 felonies. Bail was set high enough that even Charlene's friends, what few remained, didn't step in. I attended the next hearing. She looked smaller than I remembered. Her hair was tied back, makeup faded, eyes darting as if searching for a way to vanish. When her name was called, she stood but said nothing. Her attorney entered a plea of not guilty. The judge scheduled the trial for 8 weeks outside the courthouse. A reporter caught up to me. Apparently the story had caught fire on social media. HOA queen bulldozes barn, gets land pulled out from under her. I didn't give an interview, but I did make one statement. People forget that power isn't permanent, it's borrowed. And when you abuse it, someone's going to come collect. That quote made it into the local paper's Sunday editorial. 3 days later, I received a certified letter from Charlene's lawyer. It was an offer. She'd resign from the HOA board permanently, sign the dissolution agreement, and drop any countersuits if I agreed not to press further charges or pursue rent collection. I turned the letter over and wrote one sentence on the back. There is no board left to resign from. Charlene didn't respond. The county held a public hearing 2 weeks later to address the HOA's illegal annexation attempts. Residents packed the room. Several testified, describing how Charlene had manipulated votes, altered meeting records, and used fines as tools to silence dissent. One woman, elderly, soft-spoken, brought a folder of citations she'd received for things like faded mailbox numbers and non-uniform garden gnomes. By the end of the hearing, the county voted unanimously to nullify the HOA's annexation filing retroactively. The entire Briar Glen HOA charter was officially declared invalid. The legal fallout didn't stop there. A forensic accountant, hired by the prosecutor's office, uncovered that Charlene had been siphoning dues into a shadow account under a fake vendor name, Community Enrichment Solutions. Nearly $70,000 had passed through it over 3 years. It was traced directly to her personal checking account. That added embezzlement to her list of charges. At her trial, the prosecution didn't even need to bring out the big guns. The evidence was overwhelming: paper trails, testimonies, video footage. A former board member even admitted under oath that Charlene had ordered the demolition to make an example of me. She was convicted on all counts. Sentencing was scheduled for the following month. I didn't attend. I had no interest in watching her fall further. That part was done. Instead, I walked the boundary of the parcel one last time, orange flags long gone, replaced by nothing but quiet, open space. The barn stood tall, sunlight catching on its steel roof. The flag out front rippled gently in the breeze. Behind me, neighbors worked on gardens, washed cars, let kids ride bikes without fear of HOA fines. The power Charlene had wielded so smugly was gone. Not just stripped, but dismantled, root and branch. And in its place was something better: ownership without fear, community without control. I'd never planned to lead a movement. I just wanted to be left alone. But sometimes, the best way to defend your ground is to stand so firmly they never try to take it again. The last remnants of the HOA's influence vanished as quickly as the lawn signs they used to plaster on every intersection. Within days of the official charter nullification, the community mailbox bulletin board came down. Someone ripped out the approved paint colors pamphlet and turned it into a paper airplane that fluttered across the cul-de-sac. No one rushed to pick it up. I'd expected some tension after everything. Maybe cold shoulders or whispered complaints about my role in dismantling what some still saw as a necessary institution. But what I got instead was far more surprising. People started waving. The guy who used to glare at me every time I parked my truck on the street now offered me a hand when I was unloading lumber. A woman who never made eye contact before dropped off a plate of cookies said they were thanks for cleaning house. It was subtle, but unmistakable. Relief had settled over the neighborhood like a spring rain. The fear was gone. I'd been spending most of my free time restoring my late grandfather's weather vane, the only piece of the original barn that had survived the demolition intact. The iron rooster had fallen off during the destruction, landing in a patch of mud behind the oak tree. It was rusted and bent, but I'd straightened it, cleaned it, and now I was mounting it on the new barn's roofline. It was the last piece, the final touch. I was halfway up the ladder when I heard the tires on gravel. 3 black SUVs turned onto the street, unmarked save for government plates. They didn't speed, didn't idle long. They parked in front of what used to be Charlene's kingdom, and 6 men and women in dark jackets stepped out. One of them carried a metal case. Another had a file folder tucked under her arm. I climbed down and crossed the yard. I didn't recognize any of them, but they didn't look like county officials or building inspectors. These people were federal. The tall woman with the file folder gave me a nod. "You Carlson Ray?" "Yes, I'm Agent Delaney. This is a joint task force between the Department of Justice and the IRS. We're executing a federal warrant on the McDoyle property." My eyebrows lifted. "For what?" She flipped open the folder just enough for me to glimpse the words wire fraud and tax evasion. "Her shell companies weren't just for HOA embezzlement," Delaney continued. "We uncovered a network of fraudulent grant applications, fake vendor contracts, and offshore transfers disguised as neighborhood improvement budgets. She was moving money through real estate flips under false community development credits. That explained a lot. The koi pond renovation had always seemed excessive. So had the imported marble benches and the so-called community plaza that no one had ever used. Turns out those installations weren't for aesthetics, they were cover. "You need anything from me?" I asked. "Not unless you want to testify in the federal case. You've already provided substantial documentation to the county. It's been forwarded to our office." I nodded. "I'll do it." She made this personal. Delaney didn't smile, but her tone softened. It's always personal with people like her. They hide behind rules so no one questions the money, until someone finally does. As they walked up to the front door, another SUV pulled up. A man in a rumpled navy suit stepped out. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He carried a briefcase in one hand and a phone in the other. "Federal receiver," Delaney explained. "Property's under seizure. She's going to lose everything." I didn't say anything. Watching them enter her house without knocking, I didn't feel vindictive, just tired. It had been months of digging, documenting, fighting. Mistrust had been baked into every interaction around here for years. Now the mold was finally being scraped off. That evening, I walked the edge of my property again. Not because I was checking boundaries, those had been settled long ago, but because I wanted to watch the sunset from the ridge. The barn cast a long shadow, and the wind turned the weather vane with a soft creak. I wasn't alone for long. A voice called out from the street. "Mind if I come up?" It was Marcus, the flannel shirt neighbor who'd asked what I wanted back at the town meeting. He carried 2 beers and a plastic bag of something that smelled like smoked sausage. "You hosting a barbecue I didn't hear about?" I asked. "I'm starting one," he replied. Figured it's time we got to know each other without a threat letter in the mailbox. We sat on the edge of the fence and ate. He told me he was a welder, ran his own shop out in the next township, had been fined twice for leaving a trailer in his driveway. One of the fines had been tripled for non-compliance. "I paid it," he said. "Only because I didn't want to fight, but it always felt wrong. We didn't vote for her, she just took over." She made it difficult to challenge her. "Changed the bylaws to require unanimous board approval for elections." Marcus shook his head. "That's what happens when people stop paying attention." I thought about that. About how the HOA had started as a simple agreement to maintain the park and keep the sidewalks clean. About how it had evolved into something unrecognizable, a private kingdom ruled by paperwork, fear, and fragile egos. You ever think about running something? Marcus asked. Like, I don't know, a real neighborhood council. One that actually helps people? I didn't do this to lead anything, I said. I just wanted to be left alone. Yeah, but you're the only one who stood up. That means something. We sat in silence for a while. The wind shifted again, and the rooster atop the barn turned west. The next morning, I got a call from the assistant district attorney. We've got a problem, she said. I braced myself. What sort? One of the former board members, Teresa Langley, just filed a countersuit against Charlene. She claims Charlene forged her signature on several key documents. She's willing to testify, but she also provided something else, an audio recording. You'll want to hear it. They emailed it over. I listened with headphones on, standing in the barn. It was unmistakably Charlene's voice. If Ray keeps pushing, we'll bury him. I don't care whose land it is. I'll have the board vote to seize it under eminent domain. He's nobody. Just a bitter contractor with a glorified shed. Another voice, Doug's, I think, tried to object. Charlene cut him off. Either you're with me or you're out. No more delays. That barn comes down before the next meeting. The audio was time-stamped 2 days before the demolition. I forwarded it to the federal agents. By the end of the week, Charlene's charges were expanded. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Unlawful destruction of historic property. Abuse of eminent domain authority under false pretenses. At sentencing, she refused to speak. The judge didn't hold back. You used the illusion of governance to enrich yourself, he said. You weaponized bureaucracy and manipulated fear. You are not a public servant. You are a thief who wore a badge of authority you never earned. He sentenced her to 12 years in federal prison, no parole for at least 7. Property seizure was immediate. Her assets were frozen. The marble benches were auctioned off. The koi pond was drained, sold to a landscaping company in the next county. Her mansion, listed publicly, proceeds going to restitution. The barn stood untouched. Months passed. The neighborhood changed. Without the HOA, people painted their houses whatever colors they wanted. Some lawns got a little scruffier, others more vibrant. Kids chalked on sidewalks without being scolded. A man down the street built a chicken coop and invited the block over for fresh eggs. And me, I turned the barn into more than just storage. I opened it up every Saturday, a place for neighbors to swap tools, play cards, bring food. No dues, no rules, just community. The rooster on the roof kept spinning, always pointing toward whatever came next.